Hi guys, this is Kimberly from Lakeside Loops, and today I'm going to show you how to make the Kingsley Crochet Hat. As with all of my video tutorials, this is just to help you with the written pattern. You'll still need to have the written pattern in order to complete the hat. I'll just go over any trickier parts, any sections you might have questions about. That's what this video tutorial will contain. So this is what the finished hat will look like. It is so stretchy and it looks so much like knit, but it's not. I'm so excited to show you how it is made. You will need crochet hook and 1 or 2 different colors of yarn, depending on whether you want to do a 2-tone hat like I did. I used Red Heart Soft Essentials, which is a bulky yarn, and this is a 6.5mm crochet hook. Let's get started. For this tutorial, I'm going to be working up the size 7 to 10 years old, the child size, just because that's what fits my oldest's head. For the pattern, this is considered the base color, the color that's on the bottom, and this is considered the contrasting color, the color on the top. There will be color changes in the pattern, so again, base color, contrasting color. So you're going to start with your base color, the color on the bottom, and you're going to do a beginning chain. In my case, my beginning chain is going to be 33 chains, but just have a look at your written pattern to see what your beginning chain should be. All right, so I've done my beginning chain of 33, and now I'm going to slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. So not this chain, but this one, I'm going to do a slip stitch. Just like that. And you want to keep these slip stitches, you're going to continue to slip stitch down the chain. You want to keep these slip stitches nice and loose. With slip stitches, it's really easy for your tension to become tighter. And so you just have to be mindful to always keep your yarn nice and loose on your hook. Always keep that loop large, because otherwise when we come around the other way, you're going to have trouble getting into these stitches. Okay, so I finished row 1, and for row 2, we're going to chain 1, we're going to turn, and we're going to be slip stitching into the back loop. So into just this loop right here. That's where you're going to be putting your slip stitch. Now you'll see in this row that we're going to be doing a color change, and there are 2 different ways that you can bring in your contrasting color when it's time to use it. So I'll show you 2 options. So for row 2, I've chained 1, and I'm going to slip stitch right into here. Just the back loop. And again, I want to keep my slip stitches nice and loose. You should have the same number of slip stitches in every row for the entire hat. Now, to bring in your contrasting color, this is one option. You can hold it behind your row, and your first slip stitch, you're going to put your hook under it, under the contrasting color. So the contrasting color is laying over top of your hook, and you're going to do a slip stitch. Now the next slip stitch, you're going to put your hook over top of your contrasting color and do a slip stitch. And now you're going to bring it over top of your hook again. And just keep alternating it back and forth like that, over the contrasting color, under the contrasting color. And this is going to lock it in place behind your row. So that's one option for you. I'll show you the other option here. Pull that out. So the other option is that when we get to where it's time to change colors. So for row 2, it tells you to slip stitch in the back loop of the next, and then it tells you how many stitches, in my case 16. So I'm going to do that. 1, 2, 3. All right, now the next instruction says to insert your hook into the next stitch, drop your base color and pick up your contrasting color. Before we do that, I'm going to grab my contrasting color and I'm going to attach it to my base color. So I'm going to tie a knot right there, as close as I can get it to my row. just like that. So now my two colors are attached to one another, and I'm going to let this end just hang right there. This is going to be on the inside of your hat, and you can weave it in later if you want. So back to the pattern, it says insert your hook into the next stitch. Go back to holding my base color here. Insert your hook into the next stitch. Okay. Or the back loop of the next stitch. Drop your base color, dropping, and pick up your contrasting color. You're going to use your contrasting color to yarn over and pull through the stitch and the loop on your hook to complete the slip stitch. So you're just using your contrasting color to finish off your slip stitch. Now, before you continue on with your contrasting color, it's really important that you grab your base color and you bring it to the front of your row. And you're just going to leave it there. You're going to let it hang, and that's going to put it in the right spot for when you're coming back the other way on your next row. So into the back loop of the next stitch, you're going to continue slip stitching down your row using your contrasting color. All right, so I finished row 2, and again, I have the same number of slip stitches in this row as I did in row 1 and as I will in row 3. All the stitch counts are the same for each row. So as you can see, a portion of this row is in my base color and a portion is in my contrasting color, and hanging in the front here, I have my base color. For row 3, I'm going to chain 1, I'm going to turn, and I'm going to work into the back loop of the next, in my case, 14 stitches, but have a look at your pattern to see how far you go. But basically you're going to work until you only have 1 stitch of your contrasting color left to work into. And again, back loop only. So just this white, in my case, white loop that's sticking up. All right, so I've used my contrasting color to slip stitch into the back loop of those 14 stitches in my case. Again, it would be different depending on what size you're working on, but you basically slip stitch using your contrasting color until you only have 1 stitch left in your contrasting color. Then for this stitch, you're going to insert your hook, you're going to drop your contrasting color, and remember how we left that base color on the front before? Well, now it's perfectly lined up in the back. You're going to grab that base color and use that to complete your slip stitch. Now, just like the last row, before we continue on, you're going to grab the color that you dropped, your contrasting color, and you're going to bring it to the front. Now you're going to continue on to slip stitch the rest of the row into the back loop using your base color. Again, keep your slip stitches nice and loose so that they're easy to work into when you come back around the other side. Slip stitches can get really tight if you let them, so you just gotta keep your yarn nice and loose, which if you're a tight crocheter like me, takes some getting used to. All right, so you're just gonna keep repeating row 2 and row 3 until, and you'll see in the pattern, it'll tell you what row to stop, but I'm just gonna go over row 2 and row 3 one more time now that we've worked up a little bit more of our hat. So I've chained 1 and I've turned my work. This is my chain right there. So this is where I'm going to slip stitch into, and I'm just going into the back loop. Nice loose slip stitch. And again into the next stitch. And I'm going to continue going down this row until there's only 1 stitch left in my base color, and then I'm going to stop, and that's going to be the stitch where I switch colors. All right, so I'm about halfway down my row and there's only 1 stitch left in my base color. I'm going to insert my hook, I'm going to drop my base color and pick up my contrasting color. Now I'm going to give this a little tug because you'll see here that was sticking out up a bit more than I'd like. So I give this a little tug before I start using it whenever I switch colors. And now before I continue on, I'm going to grab that base color and bring it to the front. Always bring the color that you're not using to the front so that it's in the back on your next row, if that makes sense. I hope it does. You want to bring it to the front so that when you turn, it's right where you need it to be. And I'm just going to keep using this contrasting color for the rest of the row. All right, so I've moved on to the next row and I only have one stitch left in the color that I'm using. This is going to be the stitch where I switch colors. Before I do that, I just wanted to show you guys again. So as you can see, these slip stitches are really loose. They look huge and they almost look like they're going to be too big. But as you can see, this is the same size I've been using all along, and they tighten up as you go. It's really important to have them be nice and loose. It's going to become really difficult to work into the slip stitches if you don't keep your tension really loose. If you're having trouble doing that with a 6.5mm hook, I would go up a hook size or two until you get the right tension. So until it's nice and loose, it's easy to work into. Now for this next stitch, so again, I only have one stitch left in the color that I'm using. I'm going to insert my hook, drop the color that I'm using, and pick up the color that I wasn't using. And as you can see right here, that's really loose. So again, I'm just going to give this a little tug to tighten that up before I use it to complete my slip stitch. And before I continue on, I'm going to bring that unused color, the one that I'm dropping, to my front, and then I'm going to continue on with my nice loose slip stitches. Just like that. So again, this will be the inside of your hat, and this will be the outside. As you can see, you're starting to get that knit look. It's nice and stretchy, and your rows should be nice and even. Every row should have the same length, the same stitch count. If your rows start to go in like this, count your stitches. If your stitches are the same, they match the stitch count in the pattern, check your tension. Maybe you're crocheting a little tighter than you were when you first started, and start loosening it up again. This hat's really stretchy and pliable, so if it started to go in and it's only been a couple of rows, you can probably just stretch it a little bit and keep on going, rather than having to start pulling things out and starting again. All right, so to join the sides of your hat together, I've switched over to this higher contrasting swatch that I've been working on. Obviously, this isn't long enough to make a hat, but it's a better contrast than the white and the gray, which was long enough and the right size, but just harder for you to see what I was doing. So I'm switching to this just to show you how to join the sides together, and then I'll switch back to the other one I was working on. But I wanted to show you as well how to count your rows. So as you're working up your hat, these stitches are really dense and they're really close together, and you might find it difficult to know what row you're on. So I wanted to show you a couple of tricks. The first one is that if you can see how some of the lines are more solid, see that's going straight across, and this one's kind of crazy. So these two make up two rows. That's one row, this is another row. So if you count by these longer, straighter, that's one, so 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. Another way to do it is if you stretch it, it's easier to see how many rows you've done. And each of these ribs is 2 rows. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and so on. And again, your sides should be straight, and if your hat's starting to come in like this, then you know you either are missing some stitches and check your stitch count, or your tension might have to be changed a little bit. All right, so you just would have finished a row ending in your base color. You're going to turn your work around, don't chain one. You want your contrasting color thread on the outside, and you want your hook into your base color. You want to take your yarn that you're working with and bring it around to the back side as well. Now we're going to be joining this row to this row right here where the white starts. So this is going to be the outside of, sorry, the inside of your hat. This is going to be the outside of your hat, what people see. So this will be on the inside. We're sort of seaming it together from the inside out. So again, you're going to be joining the back loops of this row and this row right here where the white starts. So you're going to find where the white starts and you're going to kind of follow it across to know which row you're going to be working into, starting over here in your base color, because it's not as obvious over here as it is over here. If you want, you could put stitch markers in or little pins to try and help you keep track. So you're going to take your hook, again I haven't chained one and my yarn's on the outside, and I'm going to put it into the first stitch in this row that we're going to be working into. Now I'm also going to put it into the first back loop of this row. And now I'm going to grab my yarn to slip stitch the two together. So get a little bit closer here to show you the next one. So I'm going to insert my hook. Sorry, try that again. I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch and then also into the back loop of the next stitch on that row. Pull my yarn through both those stitches and the loop on my hook to slip stitch them together. All right, so I continued on until I only have one stitch left in the color that I'm using. I'm going to insert my hook into both rows, and then just like before, I'm going to drop my base color, pick up my contrasting color, and use that to finish my slip stitch. Now, unlike before, it really doesn't matter if I bring this base color to the front or not, because we're all done using it. So you can continue on joining your ends together by slip stitching into the contrasting color stitches for these two rows, which are much easier to see. It's much easier to see. Go into this stitch and then into that stitch. Whoops. Just like that. All right, so when you get to the end of the rows, you can actually leave yourself quite a bit of yarn here. This is what you're going to use to join this end of the hat together. So you can cut it and then pull it through. I'll show you that in a minute. But I just want to show you, this is what the seam will look like on the inside. And then from the outside of your hat, this is what it will look like. So again, this obviously isn't big enough, maybe a doll hat, but I just wanted to show you how to join your ends together using a higher contrast color. So we'll switch back to this white and lighter gray combination. And this is where I left off. I seamed them up, and now I'm gonna cut this yarn and use that to stitch the top of this hat together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hook. There was a loop on it, or there is a loop on it. I'm going to use my hook to pull this yarn through, and that'll make it so that your seam can't unravel there. So now this is nice and tight and it can't unravel. You could also tie a knot there if you want to. What we're going to do is we're going to weave the yarn in and out all the way around about every 1.5 inches. So about every 1.5 inches, you're just gonna put your hook into the end. It doesn't really matter the exact spot as long as it's around every 1.5 inches, and you're just gonna weave it back and forth. You can see I've already done this once, so there are some loops that are kind of raised up. And again, we're doing this with our hat inside out. So this is the outside of our hat. This is the inside. Sorry, gosh. This is going to be the inside of our hat. This is the part no one will see. And this is the outside of the hat. So we're doing it with the hat inside out. And you're just going to go all the way around the end of the hat. All right, so as you can see, I weave my yarn in and out about every 1.5 inches all the way around the top of my hat. And I came right back to where I started. Now you're gonna grab your yarn and you're just gonna pull it really tight to close up your end like that. Now you wanna tie this in a knot. So what I do is I just grab it with my hook, make a little loop, grab it again and pull it through the loop, and then tighten to make a little knot. Okay. Now, what we're gonna do is turn our hat inside out, or right side out, I should say. And this is what you should have so far. Now, depending on the size of your pom-pom, you could stop there. Sorry, I've got a safety pin on mine. You could stop there and add your pom-pom. You're not really gonna see those little peaks, but because I'm a perfectionist, that would bother me. So you're gonna put your hook into the top of your hat and grab a hold of your yarn, that end of yarn that we were using, and pull it through. Now we're gonna weave together all of these peaks. So you're just gonna take your yarn and you're gonna put it through the top of each of these peaks. So that way through one, back in through the other, just back and forth through each point that's sticking out. And then somewhere in the middle is where you want to bring it back into. Now, again, you're going to grab your yarn and just pull it really tight. And I think that looks a lot nicer and neater. Again, you're going to tie a knot in that by just creating a loop with your fingers and then pulling the yarn back through that loop. Nice little knot. And then you can take your hook back into your hat and through the top to bring this piece of yarn back to the inside of your hat, where you can then cut it and weave it in. So that is your finished hat. And you can leave it like that, or you can add a fur pom-pom or a yarn pom-pom, whatever suits your fancy. I really hope that you enjoy making this up. And as you can see, it's so stretchy and dense and thick, perfect for those really cold winter days. Thank you guys so much for looping together this Lakeside inspired project with me. I hope you enjoyed working up this hat as much as I enjoyed creating the pattern. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me. It's lakesideloops@gmail.com. Take care. Happy crocheting.